Wouldn't it be refreshing if your registration software gave you more time? With UltraCamp, you can track attendance, manage staff applications, streamline registration, and much more. Get back the time you need to focus on what is really important. Camp. Find out more at summercampsoftware.com/camp code.
On today's episode, we kick off a two-part episode all about training staff to work with parents. We're fortunate to welcome Travis Allison on the show to share some of his insights about what parents need right now and how camps can deliver just the right amount of care during these stressful times. The next episode, we'll talk some of the ideas discussed today and dive deeper specifically on how to prepare our staff to partner with parents.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have created and are dedicated to this podcast because we believe that staff training is one of, if not the, most important part of your job as a camp director. Staff training is what prepares your staff to care for their campers, to feel confident in their skills, to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and to learn along the way. A well thought out and intentional staff training will help you in more ways than you can imagine, and we need to help each other bring our very best. Today, I am so excited to have our co-hosts here, and you're going to hear one voice that doesn't sound quite the same. So we'll start off with an introduction from Beth, and then we'll move over to our guest.
Great. I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. I was a camp director for 15 years, but I'm now a camp consultant with my husband, Travis, and my intentional leadership training is what gets me jumping out of bed in the morning.
And I'm Travis Allison, also co-founder of Those Amazing Things with Amazing Beth, and I'm excited to be here to be talking about this today.
And I'm Ruby Compton. I am the Chief Exploration Officer of Ruby Outdoors. I'm based out of Western North Carolina, but I work with camps all over the world and spend a lot of time playing outside. Today's topic is teaching staff to talk to parents, and this is going to be a two-part episode, and we're so excited to have Travis joining us today because as a marketing guru and all-around knowledgeable camp guy, I know that he has spent some time thinking about and talking to lots of different camps about how they can partner with parents and more effectively help parents see why camp is important. So Travis, I know you taught me several years ago that to more effectively market to parents, that we must have an idea of what stresses they are managing. So what do you think are some unique stressors that camper parents are managing as we head into 2021?
Right. Well, I think that there are the obvious ones. They're stressed about their family. They're stressed about their health. I think that there are some social societal pressures and stresses that people will need to be aware of. I think that people are suffering because they're missing people, but I also suspect if and when we get back to kids on site at camps, that it's going to be hard for people to be around people again. And I think parents are kind of stuck with and stressed about, a lot of them have had their kids doing online education, and that's just what has to be. And it is also their own kids' window into the world. Um, but I mean, they're going to need to. I think they'll want to, um, go in the other direction and have lots of contact, and then think it'll be important for them to have their kids at camp. And I've heard from different camps different things, sort of regionally. Some camps are like, I can't stop the parents from registering. They're pestering me every week to register to get in, or we're already full and they're already asking us, would they make an exception for their daughter or son? And other ones are people are like, well, yeah, parents are just holding on, like they're just waiting to hear. So it's all over the board. There are tons of things. Money obviously is going to be a huge one for the next several years as well.
And so, Travis, what creative or smart communication strategies have you seen camps use this year, or ones that you've thought up yourself that you'd recommend other camps consider?
I think that the most important thing in this, I hope, is a practice that carries on. I hope that we all learn some good stuff about communication from this year, from watching others do it poorly or well, and learn from those things. But the principles of communication are can carry us through this. That communication should be concise and easy to understand, and it should be consistent. And so we should be, and I suppose the third piece that is more of a modern piece to that is that once we understand what our message is that we need to get across, we need to repeat it in lots of different media. And so I've seen several great examples outside of the camp world, and some within the camp world too. Um, I think about our mutual friend Twigs in Nashville, who put out a letter like lots of people did about the cancellation, and she had that kind of taken from her. She thought she was going to be able to run last summer, and then at the last minute, the Parks Department said no. She put out a letter to her families, and then she recorded a video of saying basically the same thing. And that's just a nice way to repeat things. It gives her stuff that she can put back out on social media if she needs, but she gives it to people in the whole picture and little chunks and repeats it. And there's been lots of other good examples around that too.
And that's such a great point to bring up, Travis, that we have to remember that because parents are under immense amount of stress right now, that you may spend all this amazing time crafting the most wonderful, compassionate email that you can, possibly craft. And the reality of it is, like, it's just one more email in their inbox, and they are probably not going to read every word. So that point about getting them from lots of different directions is critically important, and breaking it down and doing little short videos or creating some images. I think that's really, really smart.
Well, Ruby, there's lots of insight to what you just said. One is that our message will always be more important to us than it will be to our readers. And we have to remember that we know more than they do. And this has been a constant problem. I've been talking about this for years and years, that camp people are great at selling camp to other camp people. We're not that great at selling camp to people who don't know and deeply understand the impact of camp. And some camps are better at this than others, but in general, that's hard. And so that comes from our place of knowing and loving and having had a great experience at camp. Um, and we think that we should just be able to say, no, camp is magic, and people will send their kids here. It doesn't work. It won't work going forward. We'll have to think about short, easy ways that we can explain the benefit of what we do, talk about how we transform kids, talk about how camp is the answer to these stresses. We talked about the things that I assume your parents are stressed about, but you should never take my word for that. You should ask your parents. You should be doing surveys. You should have a little parent panel that you can convene and talk to about these things, just to make sure that you're addressing their specific needs. If you're a camp that draws in kids from lots of different places, the issues and what the stressors are will be different in all of those different places.
I also love the idea of the small little bit pieces of information, because if parents of campers out there, anything like me during this pandemic, my brain does not hold
Yep.
large amounts of information. And I mean, I could forget what I had for breakfast 2 hours ago. So I think having those little bite-sized bits where they just have to remember that one thing in that one message will also really go a long way.
Right. And you're totally right, Beth. The other piece of this is that we need to prove to parents, we need to reprove to parents, because building trust will be a huge part for so many of us. We're basically starting from scratch. Um, we need to prove to parents that the stuff that we send them is valuable to them. Like, sure, it's great. Like, it drives me crazy when people send out announcements about their new websites. Like, that's important to you. That's not important to your client. What might be important to your client is, hey, look how easy it is now to find registration or to find the forms. That you spent X amount of dollars in 18 months on building a new website means nothing to your clients. What is important is how it affects them and how it makes their lives easier. And so we have to be conscious of that, that the stuff that we send to them needs to be useful to them, give them the information they need, make them feel supported, build trust, etc. But we can also be conscientious and specific about sending people the information, specifically by email, that makes them want to open our emails. Good subject lines, little pieces inside there that are helpful, broken down and easy to skim, etc. It always surprises me, doesn't it? I mean, it's one of those things that it's one of those things that proved what I thought was a theory. It was a good experiment. I run this little newsletter every Tuesday morning called the Tool of the Week, and it really started out with here's three tools that I like, and that comes from the Camp Hacker podcast. We have a Tool of the Week section, and here's three things that I learned, and it's kind of grown a little bit. There's probably 8 or 9 bullet points worth of different information, not all from me, not all related to camp. But in making it short, easy to digest, it is our newsletter that gets the most opens and gets the most click throughs. And those are very important things when you're trying to get a message through to parents. So I do that so that part of it is, and many of you listening, I'm sure, are subscribers here. Part of it is that I want to prove to camp pros that the information that we put out is valuable. And so I put out something on the regular that's easy to understand. And that means hopefully that more people open our emails. And families have to do the same. You can't just keep, you can, I don't believe you should just keep saying, um, here's our COVID update, register now, send in your forms. You should mix it up with things that prove that you are an organization worth listening to and that you understand your parents because you know the stresses and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and when I was a director, I did for my new parents, maybe it was for everybody, but especially new parents. They got a newsletter every couple weeks leading up to camp that kind of said, "This is what camp is going to look like." Today we're going to talk about opening day procedures, and this week we're going to talk about packing lists. So give them basically breaking down everything that was in the parent
Yeah,
handbook
that whole
into
big
little
package.
chunks, right? And then at the end of that newsletter, I always put something that was like, here's something to do while you're in town. Like, go get ice cream from Dolly's, go stop at this restaurant. And I think this year we have an opportunity to highlight small businesses that are
Yeah,
nearby
yeah.
that are going to need our camper families if they are passing through, be it for day camp, overnight camp, whatever that family retreats, whatever that looks like this year. But also even potentially highlighting their COVID protocols and saying, this is somebody that we have worked with. We know they're taking it seriously. Like, yes, we can't recommend them enough. And that creates a lot of beneficial information for everybody, not only your community, but also your parents. And it saves the parent from having to ask that question of like, well, where should we go get lunch today? Like, you're taking that, they already know where they can go.
And it's incredibly smart. And another thing that Ruby has done when she was camp directing that I loved and I talk about all the time in presentations is creating a regular new parents meeting. You meet, you teach them a little something, one of these little pieces that Ruby just described, and and then two things. One, you have a different medium to explain a different piece of that whole package. You have a video that you can send out to people later, and you have give people a chance and access to you as a director. One of the things that I'm very proud of us for doing, but I think it's less effective than we think it is camps are really great at highlighting here's the young adults who are going to be looking after your kids. They're incredibly well trained, they're very responsible, etc. And we push them to the front. And then, as I say, I'm very proud of us for that. I think that it's an amazing part of our industry that we give young adults this training and skill and competence. But then we um, but what we're not doing is put ourselves out there enough as leaders. One thing I've heard from parent panels we've done, Joanna Warren Smith has often talked about this in her parent panels, is that parents need to know who's the adult in charge. And they're going to want that more this year. So yes, you have to do all the same things. Our staff is awesome. We do great training. They're very capable, and you should trust them. But you need to say, "Here's me. I'm the adult in charge. I'm the one you talk to if you have questions. I'm the one, that will be there in case of an emergency. I'm the one who's done all this planning." But you need to give them a focal point of a person to listen to who they they will build trust with, and that trust is incredibly important always, but it's even more important this year.
So many smart things said already in our first, 10 minutes of the podcast. So thanks for that. We're going to take a quick pause for an ad, and then we'll be back with more mind-blowing tidbits from Travis.
Hey friends, do you remember your why for getting into camping in the first place? I'm guessing it didn't involve sitting in front of a computer screen, clicking on a database. Sometimes all the busy work and button clicking associated with running camp keeps us from seeing our why for why we are there. That's why I want to encourage you to get to know my friends at Ultra Camp. Ultra Camp helps you get back to spending time remembering why you love working at camp. And how do they do this? Ultra Camp takes the stress out of signing up to use their registration software. It's super budget friendly. They have a low minimum entry cost. They have clear pricing with no hidden costs that nickel and dime you along the way. They have flexible payment terms, and no long-term contracts are required. If you think this all sounds too good to be true, friends, it is real. Visit summercampsoftware.com/campcode. And they are offering an exclusive to Camp Code listeners for a limited time. Ultra Camp is offering free setup. My friends at Ultra Camp would love to show you a future where you finally have the time to get back to what's really important, running camp. Visit their website, summercampsoftware.com/campcode, and set up a time to chat.
All right, folks, we're back with Travis talking about partnering with parents and what they need this year as we head into 2021. And as we've already seen in our conversation, so much of our conversations typically around partnering with parents are talking about how camp pros who are year-round or admin folks are working with parents. What unique roles do you see that summer staff and frontline staff have in partnering with parents?
There's lots of different pieces to it. One is they should be ready to, and frankly, trained to tell their own camp stories, to talk about how camp changed them. Um, and I think that that's a skill that they should always be using. But that also builds trust. If you have someone who can say, as I can say, I was a nerdy kid who did not fit in until I had summer camp. And if you have staff who can share that same story of struggles and bullying, etc., then you have sort of an empathy doorway towards trust. So that's part of it. The other part is that we are going to have to train and practice with our staff to be incredibly patient. Beth and I were talking just yesterday about how much patience is going to be required when families come back. Everybody's going to be on edge. People will be very excited and um, about camp. But again, we're going to have to talk to staff and say, there are going to be some kids who just come to camp and and just explode with energy. Even if that's not the pattern that we're used to with them, there are going to be some parents who are like, "Take them, I'm done. I'm out of here." And there are going to be some parents who just will not let go of their kids. And all of that just requires patience and understanding. It's hard to be empathetic when you don't have kids. It is certainly something that I had to practice a lot before I had stepkids in being empathetic to parents because frankly I wasn't very. And lots of great lessons from Beth in my whole career about many things, that one being one of them. But I think we're going to have to prep our staff and train them and really have them practice and act out situations where you have parents who are different than you anticipate, different than you've seen in the past, and have lots of their own care. They all need care too.
So, Travis, if you were running camp yourself this summer, in addition to teaching patience to your staff, do you have any other training objectives that you'd have?
Related to parents, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Um,
Or no.
sure. Well, I think one of
Whatever
the
makes you happy.
okay, I can tie it to both. I think one of the best things that best lessons from camp that staff can get are around um, what Scott Arizal calls noticing skills. that train people to see things, to see and be empathetic to kids and parents and other staff members, to not assume that the way people are behaving is means what you see on the surface. That you can, there can be underlying things that lead to those behaviors. I also think that this is classic camp stuff, but more essential, is that we have to train and get our staff to practice solving problems. There are going to be so many things. A lot of camps are going to run really lean, meaning they're not going to have a lot of extra staff, just because the finances aren't there from carrying the load over from last year, the financial load from last year. Um, and you're going to have empowered staff. Um, I think the camps that do camp best have very empowered staff, and the camps that don't have staff are like, no, I just stick in my lane. This is my job description. I stick to it. And a lot of camps are going to have to go to the Joe Richards one line job description. Your job is to do what is best to make kids sure kids have a safe and happy time here. And that's not going to be just what you did in the past. And I think those problem solving skills are essential anyway, but they're going to be important to focus on.
Yeah, and I know that something that Gabs and Beth and I have talked about a bunch is that, folks who've listened to this podcast a long time know we celebrate mistakes, and that this generation in particular may be nervous about mistakes because, your mistake that could become the next TikTok phenomenon, right? That you can't ever live down. Unlike when I was 11, if I made a mistake, like, you might be embarrassed for a few days, but it's probably going to go away eventually. And so that's a tricky piece about getting people to just try stuff. Do you have any advice for how we can empower our staff to try to take on problems?
Well, I think, Ruby, what you said is right. I think we have to build confidence in them. So we have to give them small things. We all, if we've been directing for any period of time, know that staff are coming to us feeling a lot less competent. I mean, they're a lot competent in a lot more things than others used to be, but they feel less competent. And so I think we have to give people the skills. Um, so you think about the four S's. The four S's empower people to make good decisions. Means that we don't have to hold their hand. That if someone can come to you, you've given them a decision-making framework. So instead of coming to their supervisor or the director and saying, "Can I do this?" that person can just turn things around and say, "Well, answer the four S's for me." Yes to all four, away you go. And just a gentle reminder on the way out, you don't have to answer the questions in front of me. You can answer these on your own. And I think all of that is good. And I think that part of the challenge of this year will be allowing staff to um, do things in training that allow them to make small mistakes and realize that it's fine. That traditions will change this year. Traditions will change going forward. Hopefully, a lot of them will come back eventually, but the good ones, not the bad ones. But there will be definitely changes, but we'll have to be thinking about them. I think part of it is one of my big focuses this year has been thinking about how we run a lean summer camp. And by that, I don't just mean less staff. I just mean that we are obsessed with eliminating waste in our camp programs because that's how we get through. And the big wastes for camp um, are money, human resources, time. The one I think that's often missed is movement, meaning that there's a lot of wasted movement around, whether it's your staff that have procedures that are set up that's like, I'm gonna wash the dining hall floor on it's my day to wash the dining hall floor. So everybody goes and goes to the closet, gets a broom, comes back forgot a dustpan, so I have to go back for that and then do that, and then like, oh, now I have to get the water and the like all those different steps. So if we cut back on that backing and forthing, human resources have been fairly cheap for summer camps, and we have therefore not had to value them enough, because it's not very expensive to hire people to work at camp. we don't put enough value on them. So thinking about how to do things lean will be an essential part of this, and that means a lot of decision making and practice. One of the things I love is empowering and in fact challenging every staff member. This is a great decision making practice, challenging every staff member to figure out a way to save themselves 2 seconds every day. What is something that you could do to save yourself 2 seconds? That's it teaches them that observation skills. It teaches them to think and solve problems. It teaches them to think about how procedures could change. And you need to open up the camp to the fact that there may be things that have been around forever that people are able to challenge because you've empowered them to do so. And if you're a smart camp director and you're thinking about how do we do this effectively with less resources, then you're going to be open to that. You're going to practice that, and you're going to give them daily challenges. Every day, your job, on top of do whatever it takes to make sure a camper has a safe and good time, your job is to save you or the camp 2 seconds. And it's such a small thing, but if it's, you get checked off, people have check-in meetings with accountability partners on that, then you start to build those skills in real ways. You really teach them the mindset, and you teach them the confidence to make changes as they go.
And can I just add before we move on, Ruby, that this year we, as the directors, as the people in charge, are going to have to be even more patient and empathetic with our staff as we teach them problem solving skills, because it's not just about teaching them that skill, which is so valuable in life, but it's, if I make a mistake this year, it's not that it just might wind up on TikTok or people will remember forever. It's in the middle of a pandemic. And what could that do? And so I think that also we have to keep in mind that they're going to be scared, and we have to really be sensitive to that as well.
So tying it into what you just said, Travis, you used the phrase gentle reminder. And one of the things that I've so appreciated about being in your orbit and world is that you always can see stuff that's happening in other industries, kind of bring it over to camp. And almost on cue, your new to your home dog came in the screen if you're watching on YouTube. I'm curious, because you're training her right now, is there any carryover that you've observed from dog training that you think we should think about for people training?
That is a risky question. Maybe a riskier answer. Um, well, I mean, I think the simplest piece of it is to remember to reinforce the positive. And and I love dog training. I find it fascinating. But one of the biggest pieces of that is we all know that we reward dogs when they do good things. But one of the things that makes that easier is what they call them behavioral studies. And I have a degree in psychology, which is partly why I find this stuff fascinating. But in behavioral studies, they talk about capturing a behavior, and that means that your dog can do something well, and then 15 seconds later you give them a treat. The dog can't put those two pieces together, so you have to have something that bridges between behavior you want, reward for that, and there's a bridge, and that means some sort of thing to capture it. And there are lots of behavioral studies about this, and if you've ever been to a marine park, you've seen animals doing tricks and things. They're all taught in the same thing, where there's a tool to capture something. And Michael Brandwein has a tool for doing this too. I remember one of his old um, lessons. I just don't recall the exact format. Anyway, so with a dog, often there's certainly very popular 20 years ago was a little clicker thing that you could hold in your pocket, and when the dog does what you want, you click on when that behavior happens. When you're teaching a dog to come to you, the first time you want to click is when a dog picks up their head and looks at you. Like, it's not when they actually arrive in front of you and sit down, it's when they look at you and start to move towards you. So you click at that point. So I don't know what that is at camp. Again, I think Michael has a good tool for this, but you know, for our dog CJ, we're not carrying clickers around all the time, although that's tempting. For me, when that stuff like that happens, I say yes. really enthusiastically at that moment, and then she knows that she's going to be rewarded for that thing, even if she is 50 feet away from me, and I'm trying to teach her the boundaries on our property, stuff like that. So I don't know how that exactly applies, what that thing is, but I think it's just a matter. In lots of ways, it's describing, labeling, and praising it. But there's something in
Mm.
that very moment that you have to say, that's the thing I want. We need more of that.
Yeah, and I think part of what I hear out of that is that idea of the increments, right? Like we think about, I want you to be a great camp counselor. Well, okay, that's too big. We need to
Yes,
break
totally.
that down, and like you said earlier, teaching staff to notice. Like we need to make sure that we're rewarding that piece, and even the idea of like I can't just say like notice better, right?
Yeah,
Right. Sometimes
yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah.
to teach skills towards noticing. And
Yep.
so I think that idea of really breaking down behaviors that we want to see and thinking about what does it look like leading up to. And I love that idea of the bridge too. I think is really smart.
Well, and the I mean the noticing is the important part. And I used to do this when we would have staff who would be a counselor where I thought this person has potential to be senior leadership someday. And so I would often just sit down with them, and it would be in the view of the center of camp, the courtyard, or in the dining hall. And I would just sit down beside them and I would say to them, looking through my eyes, what do I see right now? And sometimes they would say, well, there's, the stuff that you want them to see is like, oh, there's garbage over there, or there's that kid doing something, and it's like, yep, and what else? And actually, and what else is an amazing leadership and coaching tool that you should always be doing that when you're having conversations with staff. You just keep encouraging them to dig a little deeper. Just keep saying, and what else? There's a book called The Coaching Habit, and he calls that the awe question. And what else? Um, Good camp code acronym. And so just keep saying, what else do I see? And what else do I see? And even when you're past the point of all the little things that I would see, I would keep asking that because I want to know if they're seeing things I don't. So yeah, it's good skills to do that, and you can teach it. You just have to make them practice.
And I think it's a great way to empower staff to notice when each other are doing things
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, can you imagine all walking around camp this summer and all you hear is your staff saying to each other, yes, like, wouldn't that be great? So
It'd be so great.
get
Yeah.
them to shout that out during staff training when they see somebody doing something, whether it's, walking around picking up paper after a session that got left on the floor, or, those kinds of things that you can, you just teach them to say yes, or whatever it is. And speaking right on cue, here she comes. So if you're on YouTube, this is CJ or Claudia Jean. All right, Travis, you have participated in and you now coach for Seth Godin's Alt MBA program. So as we wrap up today and give you your last question, what's something you learned in your experience working with that program that you applied to your work with camps?
I think there's been lots of pieces. Interestingly, I think that there have been a lot of campy things that I've been able to apply to coaching in that. I also think the program has a lot of campy elements because Seth, who designed it, has been a camp director. And so there are lots of little pieces around the community that are there. Um, there are definite exercises in there around creativity and pushing people to do things. Like one of the assignments is to work with a team and come up with 99 business ideas and write a blurb about each one. Like write 3 to 5 sentences about each one. And you basically have 3 hours to do it. And you have to present it or submit it at the end of those 3 hours. And so it's forcing people to break out of the, "Ah, I don't know if this will work." It's like, no, put it down, write it up, move. Put it down, write it up, move. And that really forces people to be creative. The ideas are funny and silly, and some of them are just, one increment different from the idea before. It's like, this is Airbnb for dogs, and this is Airbnb for kittens, and this is Airbnb for potbelly pigs. And you're like, all right, well, that's fine. But sometimes it's just like whoa, I never would have thought of that. What a great idea. And this is a fun challenge. I think it'd be fun to do with staff. Like, what are 99? I mean, it goes back to the 2 second improvements. Like, what are 99 things we can improve about camp today? And you're in your group of 10, you're in this group of 10, and everybody does it. And I think it would be interesting to figure out a way to let new people at camp get a feel for camp, and then bring them in and really make them welcome to express that and ask why about things. So lots of cool opportunities there, I think.
I love that activity. That's it's already got my wheels turning on ways to apply that to camp. It's awesome. Any other thoughts from you, Travis, that you'd like to share before we wrap up today's episode?
Well, really, I want to come back to what I said at the beginning. We need to be very good at communicating. We need to be consistent and concise, and we need to be open and truthful, and really work on either maintaining trust because we have it, or building it with people that are new to our camp communities. All of these things are really essential existential skills for camp leaders right now. If we want our camps to be there, if we want to have this kind of service to offer to kids who've been at camp before, and be really intentional about opening up the world of summer camp to others, that these are the keys. They're the things it's going to take. Not just because of the pandemic, but just because there are many more kids in the world who would never, whose families would never consider sending their kids to camp. And that's our fault as a camp community. And it's a huge opportunity for us to give more kids this amazing experience that we all know and have been changed by.
So true, so true. And to add to that, that I think not to add more pressure to this summer, because that's not what we need, but that how we handle this summer as an industry, and that's in person, virtual, no camp program at all, whatever you decide to do, I think folks are going to look upon that for the next several years, and that's going to alter how folks view the camp industry and how essential we are viewed. So think about that, and also think about opportunities for anything great that you are doing, like spread the word, call up the news stations. People want some good news right now. So make sure we're making content out of that and getting that word out. Anything else to add, Beth?
I don't think so yet. My mind is turning on all the stuff that Travis talked about. So stay tuned for the next podcast when we figure out how to do that with our staff.
I love it. So great. Well, we want to, again, thank you, Travis, for being here today, and for, as always, dropping lots of amazing tidbits and knowledge that have got my wheels turning now. So really excited about that. And we would love to hear from you all, our listeners. What did you hear today that has got your wheels spinning? What new ideas are coming up for you? We'd love for you to get involved with the podcast. So you can tell us your thoughts on the episode by using the hashtag camp code on your social media platform of choice. Tell us also what topics you'd like for us to discuss, any guests that you'd recommend we have on the show, any great leadership training tips that you have to share. We'd love to hear from you, because we're all about sharing in this industry. And if you found this podcast to be useful, we would really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review for us in your podcasting app. Your feedback really helps keep the show going. And we love our reviewers so much that sometimes we share highlights here. We don't have new reviews this week, but we will maybe even read your review on the podcast. So we'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to be in touch with anybody on the show today, we're going to tell you how you can find us. So Beth, how can people get in touch with you?
You can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro. I'm on Instagram at topazfaye and on Twitter at topaz.
And Travis?
Well, thank you both for the invite and the great conversation. If people want to get a hold of me, it's travis@gocamp.pro. And probably the other best place online is Instagram at gocamp.pro.
Great. And if you want to be in touch with me, you can find me, Ruby, at rubyoutdoors.com. You can also find me on Instagram at rubyoutdoors and on Twitter at rubylyn85. Beth, do you want to share a little bit more about our next podcast? I know we've already hinted at it.
We are going to take all of this information that we learned from Travis as well as from our own experiences, and we're going to be doing Teaching Staff to Talk to Parents Part 2, where we get into some practical ideas that you can take back and put into your training for this year.
I'm already looking forward to that. So, yay. Sorry, for today, our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And we would love to hear some of your most memorable moments and most effective tips. You can tell us what they are using that hashtag camp code. And today, Beth has our best practice.
So, how about this activity to get you thinking about our episode next week? Get lots of large sheets of newsprint ready that are at least 3 to 4 feet in length, lots of fun markers and colorful crayons. Put your staff into pairs at leadership training and then say to them, congratulations, you are now the proud parents of a, insert your camp name here, camper. Ask them to draw their child on paper and give them, good 10 to 15 minutes to do this exercise. You might want to have questions available, maybe on a whiteboard or a projector screen that can help them to create this camper. Questions like, how old is your child? What's their name? What is their favorite toy or food or music or TV show? What book is beside their bed right now? What do they love to do? What makes them anxious or scared? Whatever questions you want to come up with, get creative. Your staff will have a lot of fun with this, and then you must absolutely allow time for each set of parents to brag about their child. And I'm talking just like 30 seconds apiece. And as soon as the very last pair has gone, I want you to tell them to crumple up their child and put them in the recycling bin. And most of your staff will give you a face that looks like this. And that is exactly the reaction you're going for, because now you get to say, after just 15 minutes with a paper child, that's how you feel. What do you think parents are feeling when they drop off their children whom they have loved and cared for at least 7 years, or however old your youngest campers are? The next step then is to put 2 or 3 of those pairs together and get them to create a list that answers the question, what stresses out parents or guardians or campers grown-ups these days? Travis dove into it a little bit today, but this is for your staff to try to put themselves in parents' shoes. And after a sufficient time, you can debrief the list together and create one large one. And I'd make a visual so that you can keep it somewhere, maybe in your staff lounge all summer as a reminder. And now you say, what does that mean for us as a camp staff in all of our interactions with parents this summer? What specific things can we do and specific things can we say to be of help to these parents? So you want to include really specific interactions that your staff has with parents. Like maybe it's opening and closing days for you. Maybe it's every day because you're a day camp, or maybe it's on the phone, or maybe it's in written communication. But how can we empathize with parents and help them raise great kids? So that's just one idea to get us started and whet your appetite for next podcast.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Well, again, Travis, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast, and lots of big pets and hugs to CJ as well for making some appearances right on cue. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all of our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode. And from all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.